This is Unsupervised Learning, Redpoint's AI podcast. I'm Jacob Efron, and I'm joined by my co-host Pat Chase. And today we had an incredible guest in Linus Lee, who helps head up a lot of what Notion's doing in AI. We had a pretty wide-ranging conversation, hit on a lot of really interesting topics, including how Notion structures their AI team, what some of the hardest things were to anticipate when they were going to market with their new AI features, a behind the scenes of how the Notion team went about building AI Writer and Autofill, and where they decide to build versus let their partners OpenAI and Anthropic build. It was a really fun one, particularly because we talked about Q&A, which is a new feature that Notion released this week. I think folks are really going to enjoy this. We've been looking forward to having you on, I feel like, for a long time. And to start, one thing I always really enjoy about your Twitter is that I feel like it oscillates between like really good insights on AI and design and then Taylor Swift.
Yes, of course.
I feel like you're a big Swiftie. I am as well.
We were just actually on my way here talking about it. Coworker and I were talking about which shows we've gone to, and so it's a constant theme in my life. Once I wrote a mock paper on what I've termed the Taylor Swift scaling laws, which is the power law relationship a log-log relationship that exists between how close you are in 3D space to the stage at a Taylor Swift show and how far into her career the show is and how close you are to the concert date. And the closer you are to the stage and the show date, and the farther you are into her career, the price exponentially increases.
Ooh.
And so somewhere on the internet, there's a PDF of some paper that's like the scaling laws, and it is all very, but that is something I've thought about.
That makes a lot of sense. So rather than getting cheaper, it just keeps getting more expensive, I guess,
of course.
Alas.
Seemingly with no limit.
Yeah. A little bit different than compute, but you know.
But also quite scarce these days.
Yes, that is fair. Actually, more scarce from experience.
Which market is more scarce, Taylor Swift tickets or H100s?
Yeah, if only there was a
Good
public
question.
company we could invest in that had cornered all of the
Swift.
Taylor Swift tickets.
Yeah. I don't know if Ticketmaster's public, but that would certainly be a good stock time.
Yeah, I guess congressional hearings only on one of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we were super excited about this. I think Notion is one of the companies that has shipped AI features really, really quickly into their product and in production using LLMs and all of the latest in generative AI. Maybe just to kick it off, it'd be great to give our listeners some context on the different products that you guys have at Notion AI and kind of what goes into Notion AI today from a product perspective.
Yeah. So just for some context, I joined Notion's AI team this past January 2023, which is a few months after Notion as a company had started working on AI. And the story, although I wasn't there, the story goes that around this time last year, actually almost exactly a year ago, there was a company offsite. And instead of Ivan and Simon, our CEO and co-founder, the two co-founders, instead of going off and joining the company every single day with the rest of the company, they took a few days off on the offsite because GPT-3 had just dropped, and they wanted to play with it and see kind of how it would be incorporated. They saw that it was an interesting writing tool, and that a lot of other companies were investigating writing approaches at the time, and so they wanted to see what they could do inside the product. And so they took, in the classic hackathon style, they took a few days off and just like hacked in the hotel room. And there's like photos in our internal Notion from this period of like Simon with like 18 bottles of water, just like in the hotel room coding. And what they came out of that like hackathon weekend was the first version of Notion AI, which internally we started calling Notion AI Writer because it helps you write. And so the first thing that we worked on that went to beta last November and then came out in February is AI Writer. It's AI in your documents, so you can ask it to say like, hey, summarize this page in XYZ format, or pull out key ideas, action items, key topics, or you could even, a lot of people like to use it for fixing spelling and grammar mistakes, or improving their writing, improving their voice and style. And so this kind of tool to edit and revise writing or draft, help you get some ideas down. A lot of people use it to get like basic marketing copy down. So that was the first thing that we shipped in February. And through that process, one main theme that we picked up on is AI and humans always work together to iterate on things to get to a better outcome. And so a lot of people will use AI to like either generate a draft, or once they've written a draft, iterate on it to fix mistakes and find ways to improve it. And so one of the things we added in this kind of beta testing period was a way to conversationally follow up and say, okay, you've generated something now, then make it shorter or make it more punchy or something like that. The next thing that we worked on was called AI Autofill. So we had brought AI to the document. Another common use case for Notion, especially at startups, is project management, because it's kind of an all-in-one package. If you have Notion, you can all do all these things. And so project management, one common tool people use is Notion databases, which is kind of a relational table. And so we added AI to be able to automatically fill in entire columns or entire properties, we call it, for if you have a table of meeting notes, you can fill in what are the key topics. Or if you have a table of like customers or user interviews, as a lot of our users do, you can use AI to pull out like what are their core needs or what do they do at their company or something like that from just like an interview transcript. And so Autofill came out in May, along with a lot of the rest of Notion's project management suite. And then the most recent one, which I'm really excited to talk about more today, is one that by the time this comes out, will have launched, which is Notion Q&A, which is instead of just helping you write and deal with information at a page level, Notion AI now understands everything inside your workspace and can help you answer questions that
super cool.
that are in your workspaces or in your pages or even maybe span multiple pages.
Is the use case, is that kind of like replacing search, or then you can ask questions of like your whole team's knowledge base, or?
Yeah, so the way we arrived at this is actually, there's a couple different paths that crossed. So the first one was, obviously we always like to start with what are people using Notion for and what are the kind of core problems that they're facing with the product today. And one common thing that kept coming up as we were trying to figure out what AI would be useful for is as organizations get bigger and as people's Notion get more complex, Notion workspaces get more complex, one key problem they run into is sometimes it's just hard to keep everything organized. It requires a lot of vigilance. And a lot of people have trouble finding information and exactly where they put it. This is doubly the case if you work with lots of other people. They might have written something down, but you don't even know that they wrote something down. And so solving this kind of information finding problem is really key. And along as this was happening, there was sort of also a trend that was happening in the broader AI community, which is retrieval augmented generation, where you can ground AI in other sort of factual information that you might have had that isn't in your training data set. And so it seemed like the confluence of those two things was a good place to build.
I'm curious on on the Notion AI team, I feel like there's the classic product management way of obviously you guys know your customers super well, like what are their core problems? Let's go build things around that. And then I imagine there's also just, wow, a new, RAG's really popular now, or there's all these new capabilities. Let's go hack and see what's possible with some of this stuff. How do you kind of balance your efforts around that on the product development side, and how much of it is more hacky, let's just see what's possible versus the classic kind of PM style of here's the user problems we're trying to solve?
Yeah, that's a question that we've, I think, also internally iterated a lot on. We definitely don't have the answers yet, but the way that we've worked so far is kind of a expand out and then contract, expand, contract kind of cycle. And so we go through iterations of sometimes we have a few hunches of what problems are important, very broad problem statements. Like it seems like it's important to help people keep information organized, or it seems like it's important to help people find information. And then sort of motivated by that, we'll have a couple of ideas on different technologies or techniques like retrieval augmented generation that seems promising for that. So a couple of us will go and prototype something really quickly. And then once we have a few explorations done of a few different approaches that could help solve that problem, usually it'll be, especially since Notion runs on Notion, we dogfood things really heavily. And so by the time we have a few of these things internally and as prototype format, it'll be fairly evident which approaches are more promising, which approaches are less promising. And so we'll pick a few of those, sort of recalibrate ourselves to say, okay, here's the prototype that we have, here are the problems that we want to solve, with a better understanding of the problem, just talking to users and thinking about things, and then better understanding of the strength of a particular approach. We'll have a hunch on, okay, this is the direction that we want to actually build and ship. And so once we have that direction, we'll iterate towards something that we feel confident, both in the UX and in the model output quality, what we feel is ready. One
thing I'm super curious about is just the resources that go into to shipping one of these products, from either engineers or design, or how much of an investment, I guess, has it been for you guys to ship maybe it's Writer or one of these new ones, kind of from the ideation phase to when it's in the hands of users?
Resources. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of startups that come, and they're like, oh, we want to add, we're a SaaS app X, and we want to ship an LLM-based feature into our product because we think it will add a lot of value to our customers. How should we think about staffing that project, right? Is that one engineer for, two engineers for a month and a designer as well to figure out the front end? So I'd just be curious if there are any learnings there from how you guys have have staffed the projects?
Yeah, I think so. I think this actually kind of couples well with your previous question around the phases. And so in the exploratory phase, I think the main thing that's really, really important is just how quickly can you iterate, and then how quickly are you kind of forced to iterate on the output. So one of the things that I think in the early phases of the new Q&A feature that we launched, one of the things that worked really well for us is we had really, really annoying prototype where like anytime anyone asked a question in the company, we would try to run this Q&A pipeline and try to answer the question. And it was very annoying to the point where like some people will like come into or the AI team Slack chat and be like, "Can you please like turn this effing thing off because it's so annoying." But that
was like the motivation to make it better. It's like everyone's
right.
gonna have to deal with this for.
So there were two things that were great about that from like where we ended up perspective. One is because it was so in your face, it forced us to like iterate on the thing to make the quality of the outputs really, really good. We were just so face to face with it every day that like if there was any improvement or any regression, we would notice it. We would have to fix it because people were being bombarded with these answers. And then the other thing that worked well for us is because it was being used. It was being used in the context of what the work people are already doing. It was really easy to tell whether the thing was useful or not. Because if it was useful, people would be using it, people were responding, giving feedback. And if it's not useful, then you don't really see any usage. And so it helped both validate and then add pressure to really improve at least the model quality side of it. So I think in that phase, iterating quickly, I think you really need a type of person who is like enthusiastic about working with the technology, kind of has maybe 1 year on the ground about what's happening, what kind of techniques people are trying, because it's still such a new space, and then is able to sort of operate with a vision of this is the problem that we solve in this kind of way, and if there are some technical problems or if there's some like operational problems that come along the way, we're going to try to like break through them to actually build a prototype that works and like solves the problem and does the job. Once you have a more defined kind of picture of the solution, I think it much more resembles a normal product building process where you have user research and designers, and you kind of work together in a way that most other traditional SaaS features are built to ship something.
Got it. So in the ideating process, is that literally just one person, like you, and then kind of taking that front end, back end, like full stack, end to end, or?
It's a few of us. We have about a dozen or so people on the Notion AI team. It's pretty evenly split between folks that spend more of their time working on like data, model, what we call quality, which is like how correct are the model outputs, how coherent are they, and so on. And then the other half works on what you call the product concerns, like interface integration into Notion.
And that's the 12 is that all eng? And then do you also have design resources? Because I feel like there's a big front end component to a lot of like the workflows, especially at Notion. Like you guys have been super thoughtful about like suggesting or guiding users towards what might be useful prompts.
Yeah, we have a couple of designers we work with also. And so frequently we'll sort of, especially in the ideation phase, we'll check in together often to figure out, motivated by what we've been able to accomplish, we've been able to get the model to output, what are some ways that we can present that in a nice way. And then every couple of weeks there's new iterations.
Is it all end to end with like that particular team, or at some point do you transition to a product team that's kind of overseeing that part of the product traditionally? Or
this is a question we feel like we haven't fully answered yet. The state of things currently for us is we have a core AI team, and there are right now most of the AI features that we've launched. There is a specific AI surface. So if you're using our AI writer product, you like hit a hotkey or hit space, and there's this bar that comes up, and that's like one space. With Q&A, there's a totally other separate like chat box that you talk to. And so it makes sense that both the backend components and the UI components our team owns. There are other features like Autofill is actually much more integrated with our databases. And so currently our databases team owns and works on that feature. There's still a pretty tight collaboration. So the folks that work on the autofill feature, I still work with really closely, and we try to figure out, sometimes, especially if there are hard AI problems, we try to collaborate and figure out what the solution space there looks like. I think there's a few different ways this could go, right? Like one is like a kind of a hub team, and then sort of liaisons in other teams. And it's more of like a partnership thing. And then you could also imagine there being sort of AI engineers in every single team, which is a little bit further from the situation we have today, but it's certainly possible. I think it's a function of both kind of how we want to organize the AI, like foundational AI technologies that Notion is working on, and I think also what shape the ending Notion AI product as a whole ends up taking.
Yeah, it sounds like it varies on like a feature by feature basis to some extent.
Yeah, and we're also still trying to figure out what the like foundational pieces of Notion AI are. And so like my thoughts on retrieval in particular, actually, I think could change over time. Where in the beginning, I thought it was sort of a purpose-built thing just for like answering questions types of things. But now I think retrieval sort of augments every capability in some way. And so it's a foundational thing that if you get it right, just like you can use a normal language model in a bunch of different ways, including some features that don't even output natural language directed to the user. If you have a model that's really good at retrieving and answering questions or accomplishing actions based on some retrieved result, then I think that also can be used in places that aren't necessarily about asking questions, but maybe about like finding related information or surfacing recent changes in a document or anything of that.
Right. So it always is going to be better at providing more context, which is probably helpful for.
So in that way, it's like a foundational thing. And even if we had like a Q&A specific team of some sort, it may still make sense for the foundation team to like work on the like retrieval component. So I think we're still in the process of figuring it out.
It's super cool, and I think a bunch of companies are kind of working through that now, and I think a lot have landed on a similar structure where they have kind of the AI SWAT team together almost, and then but I think over time, once it becomes a skill that's kind of in every engineer's toolkit, then maybe they'll expand out from that to have like these AI engineers more embedded, or maybe every engineer is an AI engineer.
Maybe. I mean, I think I'm less familiar with like the like DevOps boom, and I don't know if it's busted, but the DevOps boom. I think there are also, I think there was this dialogue that went on of like, oh, every engineer should be like doing ops, and it's like true to some extent, but you still want an infrastructure team that manages and builds tools and does monitoring and so on. I think a lot of LLMs, and I think we've seen similar things with ML too, but I think LLMs will see. My bet is we'll end up in a similar position where, like, even if a lot of engineers are empowered to use the language models to solve different problems, there's still a huge benefit to having some team that centralizes on a solution to, like, how do we monitor this thing? How do we ensure quality? Are there, like, internal, how do we manage data sets internally? How do we train models and make sure that there's, like, a regular kind of training cycle? Tools around all of these workflows. I think it still makes sense to have a single kind of pod working on it.
What have you guys learned about how your users interact with AI products? And, it sounds like you do a bunch of dog fooding with, testing them all out internally. But what have you learned about, how to educate your users on Notion AI or using these different new products as you're shipping them?
I guess we have a couple different ways. So using it internally, I think is, particularly during the like ideation phase, I think is still the richest kind of source for figuring out what are the most useful ways of using something. But Notion uses Notion in a very particular way, which is like we use every single feature that we have, and then we also use it extensively for everything that we can use it for. And so a lot of our customers...
Not exactly representative.
Yeah, exactly. Some people use it like we do, but some people, they're like individuals or students. A lot of our users are students, which we love, whom we love. And then there are some customers that for some reason we can't figure out, they're using Google Docs in addition to us. So there's lots of different usage patterns. In the first phase, we sort of try to look internally to figure out how people are using it. And then we have some early testers, ambassadors, Notion ambassadors, and other kinds of partners that we work with. And often they'll take the initial features, particularly if they require some like prompt engineering. They'll take these features and try to use it for totally unanticipated use cases. And sometimes we're like, oh, that's a really specific use case, and we don't want to support that. And other times we're like, hey, that makes a lot of sense, even though we haven't thought of it. And so sometimes they'll inspire new features that we built internally. A good concrete example of this is when we initially launched Autofill. One of the early use cases that we saw a lot of usage for, particularly abroad, outside of the US, is translation. And so people would use a custom prompt field to say, hey, translate this page into some other language or translate the summary into some other language. And so now translation is one of the built-in kind of prompts.
Very cool.
I think this pattern of having a bunch of built-in kind of engineer optimized prompts in addition to like a custom thing is actually kind of a Notion-y pattern, and that we have with Notion more broadly. There are Notion sanctioned kind of patterns, and there are templates, and then you can also fully hand customize them. With prompts, I think it's similar, where we use the custom, fully extensible part of our AI features to figure out what the key use cases are, and then we end up over time building them into these like pre-baked formulas or templates or prompts.
And do almost all people use the pre-baked prompts, or like what do you kind of notice on the user behavior side?
So there's always kind of a power law with these things, right? So the most popular use cases, and particularly for Autofill and Writer, the most popular use cases are these like pre-built things. And so summarization is a really, really popular use case. Improved writing and fixing grammar mistakes are another really, really popular use case. Depending on which locale you look at, translation is also quite popular. But then there's also, if you just look at like the total amount of usage or like number of tokens generated, another huge part of our usage is people iterating on these model outputs. And so we have this particular prompt that's for taking some user request and like revising output. And that accounts for a lot of our usage as well, which is interesting. And it kind of shows, it's a peek into like how people are using these features, which is that they use these pre-built things to get inspired about how that you could use it, and then they end up iterating to fit their specific use case. And I think if you talk to the Notion AI power users, they'll usually start in this kind of way, and then they'll end up often handwriting these prompts that they reuse over and over and over again. I talked to like a newsletter writer recently where they have a template that takes an episode of a newsletter or an issue of a newsletter and then generates the like social meta image tag that shows up on Facebook. And so they've like polished that over time, and they just keep using that same prompt.
We should try that with unsupervised learning.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get that in. But it's so interesting that like, helping users get over the like, blank canvas problem. I feel like it's amazing, even, whether it's LLM based or even in like a lot of the kind of text to image, models have the same thing where staring at a blank screen, it's hard to know what to do. And then you kind of see how people prompt it. You see, you remix those in some ways. It feels like a common, and even we talked to Canva, I feel like, maybe 3-6 months ago, and they were super focused on that. Like, how do you just get people seeing what the possibilities are? Because then the creative juices get flowing.
Right. Then that's the big difference between the like AI power users that I've talked to and people who are like, oh, I don't really know what this could be useful yet, is the people that use it a lot. Often the key use cases that they find are the initial ones that we sort of ended up rolling out pre-built prompts for, where they say, hey, I'm a marketer or I'm a recruiter, and here there's like a use case that's particularly like well defined for the thing that I want to use AI for, and so that makes sense, and they get inspired and they try to iterate and build their own use cases on top of sort of pre-built templates. Where if you are an engineer that like lives your entire day in like a C code base or something, maybe writing docs is less useful, or automating writing docs is less useful to you, and so you didn't end up having as many opportunities to bump into these different use cases where AI could be useful inside Notion. I think pre-built prompts is one. I think also one thing that we've thought about is like maybe we could, depending on what we see you're working on, suggest different kinds of. Actually, a really obvious one is like if you've used AI to generate something, we could probably look at that and make a good guess at like what kinds of revisions you might want to make next. And so that's something we've thought about. But as always, like typing, coming up with something to say to the AI is still a lot of like mental work. And so if you can make it into like, oh, here's a few options, here's one I like, I think that's always the best.
And so as you think about a feature like Q&A, from inception, which obviously it sounds like you saw all the RAG stuff going on. It's not, I'm sure there was lots of ways you thought about incorporating RAG into Notion. What ends up, as you think about that end-to-end process, what ended up being like way harder than you would have thought from the start to actually get this shipped and like into production, and something you thought might be hard, but actually didn't turn out to be that hard?
There are a lot of hard things. I guess there's some like hard technical things, and then I think there's hard product problem things. One really hard, I think it was something that we expected to be hard, but is like as hard as we expected it to be, which is just particularly with language models evaluation, which is I'm sure a theme that you've heard lots of other people talk about. But for something is where correctness and quality really, really matters, like Q&A. So if you think about Writer and how people use it to draft their emails or write a story or something like that, or begin the draft of an essay, there's actually a lot of wiggle room. Like if you ask AI to say like, hey, can you write me a high quality academic style essay about the benefits of a transformer model, it'll like do a pretty good job, but there's lots of different ways that the model could have done that and still fit your expectations. Where Q&A is like you're asking for one specific answer, and there's a lot of different ways that the model can mess up and say the wrong thing or not look at the right document, and so it's much more black and white. And I think that, plus the fact that there's a fuzzy boundary to sometimes what we think the model should be able to do. Like some people, a lot of the questions that we want to answer are questions that are answered by some content on a specific Notion page. But another common answer, especially when we started handing it out to users, we saw was like people will sometimes ask very meta questions about Notion. Like they'll ask like, how can I share this page with Jack? And I'm like, that's not really in your Notion workspace. Yeah. But you could imagine why someone would want to ask that to like a ask Notion AI feature, right? Or like, how many people are in my workspace? It's kind of like a meta question. And so anticipating all the different kinds of questions, or another one actually that we spent a lot of time working on was questions of this form, what is the marketing team working on this week? The this week part is like, there isn't really a document in your workspace that says, on the week of October 25th, this is what the team worked on. It's just, there's constant updates in your workspace, and then the model should be able to look at documents sort of like by time over time and answer that question. And that's quite different than a traditional kind of RAG pipeline. And so enumerating all these different kinds of ways where the question might poke at the edges of the model's capabilities or the pipeline's capabilities, and then constructing high-quality evaluation sets for those, figuring out what criteria you want to grade on them, and eventually finding ways to remedy all these different kind of edge cases, padding out the edges of the model's capabilities, I think was a really hard overall problem. But it's a problem that actually has like 30 different subcomponents, right? And then from a just like operational perspective, I think there's a lot of questions we wanted to answer around like what are the needs of our customers around like privacy and security, how much scale do we need, and because this is this like language model augmented question answering is still a thing that lots of companies are in the beginning stages of exploring. There aren't like clear obvious answers from the industry on those questions, and so we have to go back to our customers and sort of start from first principles.
On the evaluation side, I'd actually be super curious. Have you built out tools internally for doing that? Or like, how do you go about evaluating the models kind of maybe in development phase, but then also once they're in production?
Most of I would say the vast majority of the tools that we use to work on our language model powered AI features are built in-house.
Okay.
That's a function of two things. One is back when we started building these things, there weren't as many tools as there are now. And so we kind of had to build them on our own. But I also think like Notion documents are actually very structured and quite complex. Like they're rich text documents, which to start with are much more complex than like a Wikipedia page or a PDF. They can contain like tables, for example, or contain images that can contain columns. And then also a lot of pages have metadata. So if you're using a page to keep track of the status of a project, it'll have like tasks associated with that project. It'll have due dates and people involved in it. And it's not trivial to represent that just as like plain text. And so we have lots of custom data structures and ways to represent these for models. And so traditional sort of off-the-market tools, at least in the beginning, didn't suit our needs as much. And then I think just having your own tools lets you iterate much faster. So if you notice that like even something as simple as like, hey, our evaluation tool or maybe there's an off-the-market tool that lets you view results from two different models side by side, but it only supports like two side by side. What if I want to compare a third one? Well, if it's an in-house tool, it's a few minutes to go in and add that third column. And I think those things kind of end up adding up a lot. But on the evaluation point specifically, we look at it on a kind of a spectrum. On the one end so you're trading off how costly it is to evaluate with how high fidelity the evaluation is. So on the one end are deterministic programmatic evaluations of model outputs and model-graded outputs. And then on the other end are like humans looking at the output. And underlying all of this is some evaluation data set where we've said that here's a particularly hard category of problem. Like maybe the category of problem for particularly relevant for Q&A is like answering questions that involve time ranges. And then we'll have some like data set for documents that or user queries and document sets that fit that. And then we'll have some evals that are more like, did the model output unanswer? Did the model use some form of query that involved a time range? And then somewhere in the middle we have a team of human annotators that we work with to speed up some processes. And then way on the other end there's actually a lot of payoff to like our ML engineers looking at the model outputs and not just knowing like, oh, this model did better than the other model, but looking at the actual outputs and saying, why are the models messing up? Is it because the model didn't understand the instructions? Is it because it has a hard time thinking about relative dates, but it's better with absolute dates? Like these are the kinds of things that we've seen. And so people working in the actual systems, looking at model outputs, looking at the data sets has a lot of payoffs. And that's way on the other end of like very costly and expensive, but actually yields sort of commensurate rewards.
And as you're working on that problem, are you mostly iterating on the way you're prompting with the data that comes out of like the out of the database, or like are you changing the way you're adding like metadata to the embeddings? Like how do you ultimately solve that problem?
We iterate on the full stack, and so one of the benefits of owning everything from the database layer up is anything we want to add or tweak or try out, we can. And so if we want to, at some point we experimented with adding an extra stage on top of the traditional RAG pipeline that took retrieved passages or chunks from the vector database and then try to like rephrase or re-summarize to better answer the question. And like that's the kind of experiment that we've done, run the evals, and at some point we decided it was interesting, and then at some point we decided, oh, maybe it's not so helpful. There's depending on the reason that the pipeline messes up, the right place to intervene is a function of that. And so if the reason that the model messes up is actually because of the document with the answer didn't end up in the model context at all, then that's like an embedding problem, or it's a ranking problem or something like that. If it's just you had the right documents, you just got confused about like what was the most relevant part or something like that, then that's like the answering part of the pipeline. And so that's the part where like just numeric evaluations doesn't do justice to the problem, and you have to have someone sit down and figure out what are the most common reasons that the model is messing up, and go back to the pipeline and figure out where to intervene.
And then as you guys have thought about models, have you thought about using off-the-shelf stuff versus, using, obviously you sit on an incredibly interesting set of data. I feel like we've seen folks either fine-tuning smaller models to be able to run faster and cheaper, or, but a lot of people I feel like start generally with state-of-the-art, see what's possible, and then kind of iterate from there. Mm-hmm. How have you guys kind of thought about that?
We have been really lucky to have great partnerships with Anthropic and Open AI since the sort of early days of when we started working on it. And so they are very good at the infrastructure and like initial model building part of things. Mm-hmm. I think it would be exceedingly difficult to compete at the infrastructure level with either of those companies or Google. And so while conceptually, the way I think about this is like the problem that they are solving is how do you build a good model that follows instructions, and how do you host it in a really scalable way, in a reliable way. And then the problem that we are solving is more understanding the particular tasks that we want our models to perform, mm-hmm. and then figuring out how do we best collect or generate synthetic data for those models. One of the things that we've committed to is so far is not training on our customer data. Yeah, mm-hmm. So it's really important. Like, I don't want Notion models to be trained on my personal data because I keep a lot of my own information in Notion. And so that's of course a challenge, but I think it's actually pushed us into thinking a lot more systematically. But like, if you're generating a synthetic data set of like workspaces or Notion documents, you have to really understand what are the core kinds of archetypes of pages, how are these structured, and so that's actually, I think, forced us to really understand how Notion workspaces are organized. And what kinds of documents are the prototypical documents we want to serve AI for. But on the model question, our role as compared to their role in this kind of partnership is like understanding are the profile of our tasks really well, figuring out how we can like evaluate those tasks. If even something as simple as a summary, what makes a good summary is actually the criteria for a good summary is actually really different for like a meeting note versus like a long technical document. Totally. Versus sometimes a Notion page is just like a bug report. Like, it doesn't really make sense to even summarize that. It's like the bug is in the title of the page. And so understanding the task and then doing the legwork around like building the data sets, evaluations around that task, I think is more where we've spent a lot of our time. It's always on the back of the minds of the different people on our team that there's a possibility that, we could always explore open source models. I think we're doing some exploration around different kind of embedding models right now. But so far, we haven't shipped anything to production with open source models.
How do you think about with, like running multiple models? Like, I guess maybe you run them against your evaluation set and kind of see which one is, the best for the different use case. But how do you think about testing those or running multiple models side by side?
Yeah, the best model to use for a particular feature depends on a lot of things. Depends on, first of all, the model has to kind of perform up to expectation. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, there are like some models can support higher throughput. And so if you want something that runs kind of batch in the background for our autofill feature, anytime the page changes, we sort of re-summarize the page or re-extract the information. And for that kind of thing, you probably want a model that can support higher throughput. And so depending on all these factors, we look at kind of everything from the capabilities to the cost, and then figure out what the best model is. And often that means totally different model scale, perhaps different provider for different features.
What kind of pre-processing do you guys do before you're sending the request to these models? I think, Jacob mentioned we talked with Canva, and they had this like elaborate filtering process where they would, go through a bunch of different checks before sending out one of the queries. Like how much pre-processing do you guys do, and then kind of what goes into forming those prompts?
For every Notion AI feature, if you are specifying some kind of prompt or query, it'll almost certainly be wrapped in a lot of our own processing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that is like for a lot of our writer features, if you say something like, oh, you did a good first draft, but make this more punchy, that'll be wrapped in some prompt template that includes like what the model's already done, maybe the full history of the dialogue plus your revision. For something like Q&A, we have one of the first phases is we take your Q&A actually supports multi-turn conversation. Mm-hmm. So if you ask a question initially like what's David working on this week? And then it gives you an answer. You could follow up by saying, hey, tell me more about that like automation project. And it'll know the context, and it'll search. There's a query rewrite phase where the model might search for something like David automation project, mm-hmm. given the context of the conversation. And so even in places where it's not so obvious perhaps that there's a middle layer, that we do a lot of passes to restructure queries to restructure prompts.
And then on the output side, like for something like Q&A, do you have like a checking process at the end where you're like, let's make sure this isn't totally hallucinated or ties back to some document, or have you just tried enough edge cases that you're confident in the output?
This seems like the kind of thing that may change over time. So I certainly wouldn't commit to what I'm about to say, but especially as the models get better, I think we found it pretty good at not saying.
It's impressive.
At least not saying objectionable things. And then things like hallucination, I think we've made a lot of stride on, but it's still something that we're working on the edges.
I mean, one thing I'm curious about is I feel like you guys are gurus on the prompt side of like figuring out you're experimenting, one of the like scale and a lot of interesting edge cases at figuring out how to get the right outputs from these models. And I think one big question in this space is going to be how easy it is to switch between models. And I'm just curious about your experience when you like nail the prompts for, a certain type of model. How easy is it to like, switch out OpenAI for Anthropic or go to a different, kind of like size model and still have those prompts hold true for, it's kind of a macro question, but I'm curious what you've observed on that.
Prompts are downstream from the evaluation criteria that you use to judge a model's output, which are again downstream from your understanding of the problem or the task the model needs to perform. And so I think we do the best job at prompt engineering when we have a clear understanding of, like, for summaries, as a sort of pet example again, for a particular kind of document, which maybe we use a different stage of the pipeline to identify or something. For a particular kind of document, here are the criteria, and then we might ask the model, make sure that your summary includes these things and doesn't include these things and is of this format, based on our understanding of the task. And then maybe the per model tweaks that we do, maybe like, type something in all caps to make sure the model doesn't do it. Maybe we notice that like a common pattern with summaries is a particular model from a particular AI vendor really likes to say, in this document, the document discusses XYZ topic. And like, you don't really need to. And I've tried so many different ways to get the model to just like not say the phrase in this document. Like, don't be meta, don't reference in this document, just like rephrase the content. It's just like very hard. And so those kinds of tweaks, I think, may be different per provider, per model. And so those you might have to tweak in the end. But I think the bulk of the instructions, especially as models overall get better at following instructions, the bulk of the tweaking is just like what the criteria are, and then what the shape of the task is, what format do you want. And then those are, I think, that understanding of the problem and the task, I think, carries over between models.
Yeah. What about across languages?
Ooh. Large models generally transfer well across languages. I think they also, models, at least the ones that are trained with sort of like a representative corpus from the entire internet, they still tend to exceed at English or excel at English, and then sort of performance falls off in some way across other languages. And so as a baseline, they transfer pretty well. We'll usually just prototype with the English one because Notion's predominantly English. And then as we get closer to launch, we'll have specific evaluation data sets for evaluating multilingual performance, and we'll try to like add few shot examples or do training to bolster performance on the other languages. But as a baseline, we find at least the really large models transfer well across languages. Actually, for Q&A in particular, this is really fun because you can ask a question like what are some sales that the Japan team made this week? And even if those documents are in Japanese, it'll like read those documents and translate the answer back to you. So you don't even really need an intermediate translation layer, which is cool.
You've been a big proponent of kind of iterating on interfaces and making the interface kind of right for the AI use case. Like, how do you think about giving users or maybe power users freedom and flexibility versus kind of guiding people towards, maybe how AI can be most helpful for them, and what that means for how you design kind of AI features at Notion?
And I think the answer is similar for both Notion in general as well as for AI, which is you want to pick the right building blocks. And you want to give users, you certainly want to, for every AI feature, there's always, you can always drop down to like something quite near the lowest level, which is you can just prompt the AI pretty directly. Obviously, we still have some intermediate processing to add like the context about your page and your workspace and so on. But there are some pretty vanilla, blank, unopinionated prompt templates that we use for like the power users. But even then, you want to decide like what context to include for Notion more broadly. The customization, like the users still can't write their own HTML and CSS, right? We give you instead this like pretty rich block abstraction. And so one question though I've had for the longest time since I joined the team was, what are the kind of blocks for AI? What are documents for AI? What are blocks for AI? Which we still, I think at least the team doesn't have a consensus on what the answer is yet. But you want to give people the right abstractions. I think depending on what you want the AI, what you consider the AI output, those abstractions are different. If it's just writing, then I think writing's pretty free form. And so I think custom prompts go a long way. If it's like, I've talked with some of my friends recently about generative interfaces where models can output, instead of text, it can output like an entire piece of UI. In that case, you probably want some kind of like a component library or a UI language where the model outputs like buttons that do things. And probably all the buttons should look similar and coherent with your overall product design. Adapt recently started exploring models that can perform actions. And so in that world, it seems like they're also exploring, I don't know if you've looked at their new release, but they have a kind of a domain-specific language also for taking actions in the browser. And so like maybe that's their building block. And so for customizability, you want to pick the right building block. I think we're still in the process of exploring what exactly we want like the full capability set of Notion AI to be, and what the building blocks will be a function of that.
Well, we always like to end our interviews with what we call the quick fire round, where we get your hot takes on everything in AI. Good to take a sip of water before the quick fire round. I totally agree. But to kick things off, we like to ask everyone, what's one thing that's like overhyped and one thing that's underhyped in AI right now?
I think context length is overhyped. I struggle to imagine really, really useful tasks that require like 50,000 words. I think a lot of it resembles like retrieving some information. But I think even if you can pack all of your data in like 100,000 tokens, if there's a lot of noise in that data, the model's still going to do worse. And you still want to have some amount of like filtering over the data.
Yeah, I feel like 6 months ago, it was like there was still debate on like whether it was going to be RAG or just ever expanding context windows.
Right, and I think at this
like
point
Team
it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear you accomplish both. I mean, I think RAG is always the retrieval. Getting good information into the context, I think, is always going to be like where you need to start. And then maybe there actually are like 10,000 tokens worth of really relevant information. And then at that point, maybe the extra context is helpful. But I think it's also kind of an issue when you're training really long context models too. This is now like not quick fire. I'm just like going on a rant. But if you're training models that are up to like 64,000 or 100,000 tokens in length, how are you like an interesting challenge is, how do you find examples of tough instruction following tasks with like answers where the model needs to make full use of the entire 100,000 tokens of context window? Like those are not, this is not like a naturally occurring data set. Some clever approaches that I've seen include like one particular task that you can construct sort of synthetically is you take a really long piece of text, you find some subset of that includes an answer, and then you generate the answer to that with a smaller low context window language model, and then you give at training time, you give the long context model the full original text, and then the model has to locate the information from like needle in a haystack from this like larger document. And like you can do synthetic tricks like that, but I think fundamentally most useful tasks don't require that much. I feel like probably like 16 to 32K. I feel like I might eat my words in 5 years, but at this point, I think a lot of things that we want language models to do, 32K tokens might be enough. A thing that I think is underhyped is alternative to transformers, which I guess maybe another way to say that maybe the transformers are right, but I don't think that's true. I think transformers are awesome, but it's the great thing about transformers is that they are really good at modeling long sequences and they are efficient. Nothing architecturally about the transformer is like the most optimal thing ever, and so I think it's totally possible that we're going to find another architecture that is really good at modeling sequences and efficient, maybe even more efficient.
It's interesting. I think we've had a couple people say that about transformers. They either, as you mentioned, said transformers were overhyped or alternative architectures were underhyped, which will be interesting to follow.
Yeah, I mean the reason that we have these models we do now is mostly because we just train on so much data, and the models are good at absorbing that information. The models being good at absorbing information, I think, is actually pretty key. Like models we've had previously that theoretically supported really long context trees were not really good at utilizing all that information. Like LSTMs are really terrible at using context beyond like a few thousand tokens. But now that we know why we're starting to get a good understanding of why transformers are really good at these tasks, I think we'll see alternative architectures emerge over the next few years.
Any you have your eye on?
I think state-space models are cool.
Fire round number 2. What's been your biggest surprise building Notion AI? Or what's one thing you thought would work that didn't end up working at all?
It's probably more nuanced than I think the question stylistically asks for. But I think I've been surprised how well really general approaches work. I guess this is a kind of a lesson around how to customize a model for a particular domain or a particular set of tasks. A really specific example is like if in your product you have like 5 different tasks you want a model to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want it to answer some questions, you want it to like help you write something, you want it to like maybe another one might be like an idea that we've thrown around at the company is like AI should somehow be able to like help you onboard onto a product faster. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine a few different tasks that you want a model to do. A thing that it might be slightly easier to get up and running with is to build like specific prompts and specific models for each of these cases. Mm-hmm. But I think there are longer term payoffs for potentially trying to build a single model that does all of these things. Maybe you build data sets for each of these cases, but then you train a model on all of these things. Or and that's like one way where you work towards like a general thing that can solve all these things. And I think there's you end up with a model that like overall understands the domain of your product better. Another example might be like I'm starting to do some experiments with generative UI. Our models output interactive elements, or I should say me and a couple of the team members are. And that's the kind of thing where like there's again a trade-off to be made between do you build an interface that is like hard-coded but that's powered by generative AI, or do you give the AI more control over what shows up on the screen? And giving the AI more control over what shows up on the screen is like a harder ML problem. But I think my bet is longer term, you're going to see a lot more interesting things you can do with that. And so I think given the pace of how quickly models are getting better, generality, I think, is something interesting to bet on.
And I feel like, from first principles, Notion would be one of the most interesting places to work on AI features more generally. If you weren't at Notion, like what one company would you go to work on their AI features?
I mean, I think Midjourney is such a unique company. There's lots of unique things about them. The one that I'm particularly curious about, I would be curious about as someone who likes to prototype and tinker, is they operate in a really like lab kind of way. I think GitHub Next, that works on Copilot, also operates similarly, or used to operate similarly. Based on my references, they're a little bit outdated, but where they have kind of individuals that are champions of specific ideas, and then they sort of push specific projects forward or prototypes forward. And then if that approach works, it ends up blooming into something that's sort of ready to go to production. And at that point, there's probably more of a team effort. But it's kind of not really a competitive environment, but it's kind of a garden of just like different people trying different things and trying to figure out what the best ideas are. And I think that always yields really productive outcomes. I spoke to someone at one organization that operated like this, and they're like, "Yeah, we internally have like 6 different versions of our next model." I'm like, how does that even work? Like, wouldn't it be more fruitful to just like combine all those ideas into one? And like, I think if you have individuals, or especially if you have sort of individuals that are motivated to solve a particular problem, individuals are able to iterate much, much faster than a team. And so this kind of garden approach, I think, actually works really well. So I think Midjourney is super interesting for that reason. I think Adept is also actually doing a lot of interesting things. They are tackling a really, really ambitious problem, which is this like incredibly general agent that's able to perform any task that you can on a computer. But it seems like they are taking their challenge in stride, and I'm sure they'll do interesting things.
And to wrap up, where can people go to learn more about you and Notion AI?
So for Notion AI, we have this shiny, relatively new domain, notion.ai.
Ooh.
And if you go there, you'll
You have to battle for the .ai, or did you guys already have it?
I did not personally battle for it, but I'm pretty sure Akshay, our COO, stepped in a ring of some sort. Threw some dollars on the other side.
That feels like one that would be way cheaper to buy early in the company's history than now.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, I don't even know. I actually don't know any of the backstory how we ended up with that. One day he just came up in our channel and he was like, Notion.ai, here's a domain. I'm like, where did this come from?
Don't ask any questions.
Yeah. Picked it up in a back alley somewhere.
Yeah.
But you can go to Notion.ai, or if you're already using Notion, I'm sure there are emails in your inbox waiting for you to help you try it out and hear how you use it. I am probably most active on Twitter at the Cephist, or if you like Google Linus Notion. I also have a blog where I sometimes write about interfaces in AI.
Can confirm, great Twitter follow. Highly recommend. For the Taylor Swift content.
For the Taylor
too.
Swift content.
Well, that was a super fun episode with Linus. I think it was really, really cool to hear him talk about how Notion structures their teams, especially around AI, with kind of this, I think he said there were a dozen engineers working on it and then a few designers. And also just how they kind of iterate quickly in the early stages and like test these features out internally. That it really stuck out to me how much dogfooding they do, both with like the feature set and the evaluation. It seems like all of Notion is really, well, they're living in Notion, but then also testing out these AI features. I thought that was really cool.
Totally. And it's interesting, right? Like, for a feature like Q&A that they build, you could have a product team that's just thinking about that. But what I think he said, which is super smart, is they're going to do so much in the future around retrieval augmented generation that getting that right feels like more of a foundation, like layer level decision for them.
Yeah.
And makes total sense to kind of split it out.
Yeah, it was interesting because it seemed like that had kind of been a journey for them where they started thinking, okay, we're going to build AI for each of these products. And then now Linus's thinking is, maybe there's more of a horizontal platform where, the retrieval all happens by one system, and maybe you have one model that does a bunch of different tasks. So that was kind of interesting to see as a company that's a little farther in their AI journey.
Yeah. And I feel like one common trend with all of these AI companies implementing products is that it's so hard to predict what people will do with them. Like, it's funny. You think like a product like Q&A, it's literally a search product. Like I totally imagine you'd think, okay, 99.9% of it is going to be like, what's the answer to this question? What happened in this meeting? And it's just hilarious that people are using it. Like, how many users are there total? Or like, what happened, this specific week? Or
they're using it for Notion support.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do I share this?
Yeah.
And so hard to predict that without. I think you made the great point during the episode that that's one of the big advantages distribution has. Like, you learn that so much quicker.
Yeah. Having
so many people, both internally and then externally, using it so quickly.
Totally. What did you find exciting or interesting?
Well, I got to read this Taylor Swift paper now. Like, that was definitely what a wild.
This is the second episode in a row that we've talked about Taylor Swift.
I think we should make it a trend.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out how we can hit it with Perplexity.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I'd asked him, the explicit question I'd asked him was what song, like it best encapsulates what's happening. And I'd obviously thought a lot about my answer.
Yeah, so what was
but I didn't think
your
I got it. You need to calm down.
AI song that most resembles Taylor Swift song that most resembles the AI market.
Yeah.
You need to calm down. That's
I think
good.
I think that would be my message, but also like I feel like in the pre-show you were saying 22, which I think also kind of encapsulates some of the young vibes.
I like 22. It's at this young, like opportunistic world is your oyster type phase, and so I don't know, peak hype. That's what 22 feels like. Yeah, so I would go with 22.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe we just have to add that to the quickfire now. From now on.
Favorite Taylor Swift song, or that's a good quickfire.
Over underhyped Taylor Swift song. I thought another thing that was really interesting in the episode was just how much they built themselves.
Yeah.
Like eval. I feel like we've seen tons of eval companies. It's obviously such an important space. But God, what a hard problem. Like,
it's really interesting to think about if they would build all of that now.
Yeah.
Because the market is changing so quickly. And even 6 months ago, it looked different than it does now. And 6 months before that, when they were starting on a bunch of this AI stuff, there wasn't this whole crop of startups that we've now seen. But it also seems like Linus kind of thinks that they had to do some of that because they were iterating, and this allowed them to iterate faster. But I don't know. I think
well, also it's interesting to hear like there's no substitute for manually going through the ones that really don't work. And a lot of the automations that you might want to do around this are just kind of summarizing it with a number. It sounds like where they've gotten the most value is going super deep into, what fails and understanding why.
Yeah, totally. It was fascinating that because they want to own everything, it seems like, except for the model, which they're happy to outsource to Anthropic and Open AI. And I thought that was interesting, which kind of makes sense. Like they're an app company. They're not an infra company that needs to be training and deploying models at massive scale. But I thought that it was interesting. He was kind of like, no, we don't do that.
Because you'd think that maybe at some point, for either latency reasons or cost reasons, you might want to try something else. But the reality is, as you said, the large foundation model companies keep slashing costs, and they have a pretty broad array of options of model speed. And so, it seems like they've been able to get by just fine, not having to make any of those trade-offs.
Yeah, and they want the Notions of the world to be successful building on them. Like this is the perfect use case for LLMs in SaaS, and people are always like, oh, what's the enterprise use case for LLMs? Notion AI is, I think it's kind of GitHub Copilot was probably number one. I think Notion AI is one of the top, 5.
Yeah, no, we made a presentation for some of our portcos, and it was like one of the main logos, right front and center. I feel like it's certainly one of the most like one of the most interesting consumer facing applications that's used these in a meaningful way.
Totally. I had a bunch of opportunities to either make fun of your writing or my own writing and how much AI could help it. So maybe next time we need to work that in.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I could definitely use some help.
I think, honestly, I think the templates that they're shipping, like, I really like the buttons. I don't know how much you've played with the product, but just like summarize, or like, I personally like that, because even just coming up with the prompt to be like, oh, I want to do this thing for a blog post, it can sometimes take a lot of mental energy beyond, I don't know. Yeah.
Totally. I feel like you and I are both not like, social media naturals. And so I feel like even having used some of these tools before, like I had this one that I was using with tweets that was just like literally all it was like make it punchier. And it was so helpful because like it's just not my style.
Yeah.
What do you think of OpenAI Dev Day?
I think it's fascinating. I don't know that anything was that shocking. I think the two big trends are longer context windows and cheaper models. I think we've kind of been seeing that for a while. We talked about the cost for inference and the cost for training going down 10x over the last year. I think this is more of the same. They slash prices, 3x, I think, for Turbo. And so prices keep going down. I think that's great for the startup ecosystem. And then, they're kind of shipping a ton of stuff. And I think this is also, they own the models, and they're starting to build up the stack into, more solutions. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just wild to be running a business with AI features, and on any given day when this happens, your costs go from like 15% of revenue to 5% or something. Like it's just the swing that happens in these price changes is so impressive. And I wonder, it seems like it's poised to kind of continue. But it like you said, it's so hard to then predict. Oh well, something's kind of cost prohibitive to do today, or we can't charge enough for that today, and it's like. You probably just build it anyway because 6 months from now, 12 months from now.
Totally. Well, it'll be interesting to see what Anthropic does now, because I could imagine if you were a Notion and you're running Anthropic and OpenAI side by side, there obviously are some differences, as he was saying. Certain use cases, one's better versus the other, but now one of them is 3x cheaper than it was before, and then so maybe Anthropic would also have to cut their prices by 3x, which again would be great for everyone that's building on top of LLMs.
Yeah, it's just cool to see I feel like the energy around, like, even just all the people that are watching it live, and just like it's really cool to see.
I mean, some of the demos are really cool. The text to speech and the talking was very cool. I don't know if you saw the part where they were giving out free OpenAI credits to everyone in the audience, and they were like, "Oh, find 5 people in the audience and give them $500 of OpenAI credits." And then they did that. And they're like, actually, everyone here is part of our community. Give everyone here $500 of OpenAI credits. And it just went through. And then the AI was saying, hey, you're all getting OpenAI credits, and started naming the people. I don't know. It's very cool.
Yeah. And I feel like, there's right afterwards, there was all this like, there's this the death of RAG or the death of vector databases. And it's like, it's great that they added a lot of those features in, but obviously there's so much people are going to want to do outside of OpenAI, both just sensitivities around where they send their data, abilities to kind of customize, implementations of that. And so, I think it was like kind of hypey on Twitter for a bit afterwards, but I'm curious to see what.
Totally. I think there were a lot of people on Twitter that were saying, this is going to kill all the startups. And then there was the other camp that was like, oh, no, it's not. And I think there were a bunch of people making the comparison to AWS, which I think is a very good one, in that they're going to offer a bunch of tools and tons of them, but in any given vertical, like Snowflake did, or like some of these other companies did, there's totally an opportunity for startups to compete with the product in that vertical and win for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I like how you got in the Snowflake reference there. Good.
Always have to get in Snowflake. Yeah, as many times as possible. Maybe we need to make it start.
Yeah, we just have
fake snow in this room. Yeah, we're already in the mountains.
Maybe whenever it's uttered, it just like snow comes down in the room.
That was really fun.
Yeah, dope, dude.
Sweet.